Donald Trump getting elected was the advent, the birth of the resistance. I'm sorry, quote unquote, hashtag resistance. What they're resisting, I know not what. And I would wager up to this point, many of them outside of Trump don't either. And yet, one pussyhead at a time, they screech and bitch and moan. And by the way, that's not gender specific. Hashtag resistance. You know what resistance is? That's resistance. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And yeah, Chelsea Manning is literally the picture of resistance. If you remember earlier, Chelsea Manning was held in contempt of court. Outside the courthouse, Chelsea Manning said this.
How's everybody doing? All right, cool. Good afternoon, everyone.
And just so we're clear, my audience knows, but sometimes I forget that I don't have a continuity of audience. Many people may come in. Chelsea Manning was, a grand jury was called for Chelsea Manning to testify. Chelsea Manning refused. She said, I don't believe in grand juries. They put her in jail. The grand jury expired, in which case Chelsea Manning was let out. But another one was convened immediately, upon which Chelsea Manning, standing outside of the courthouse, addressed the audience. This is what she said just before going in and just before being re-arrested.
So 2 months ago, the federal government issued me a subpoena as here at this to appear before this courthouse, before the grand jury. As a general principle, I object to the whole institution of grand juries. Prosecutors run grand juries behind closed doors in secret. Based on my refusal to answer questions 2 months ago, the grand jury, compelled me to, or in order to try to compel me to testify, they sent me into confinement. So I got released last week, and here I am today with the same subpoena, or a different subpoena with the same questions. Throughout this ordeal, I have had an enormous amount of support from some of the most closest people that I have, and also from like an enormous number of people online and through letters and through cards, and it's just been incredibly inspiring and really powerful for me. Jails and prisons exist as a dark institution, and despite that, it doesn't frighten me or disturb me. I mean, I've already been to jail, I've already been to prison, so attempting to coerce me with a grand jury subpoena is just not going to work. I will not cooperate with this or any other grand jury. So it doesn't matter what it is or what the case is, I'm just not going to comply or cooperate. Facing jail again, potentially today, doesn't change my stance. The prosecutors are deliberately placing me in an impossible position. Go to jail and face the prospect of being held in contempt again, or in the alternative, foregoing my principles, the strong positions that I have, that I hold dear. And the latter is a far worse prison or jail than the government could ever produce.
What she's saying here is important from a technical standpoint. This standard is astonishing to me, but apparently it's true. They can keep her in jail as long as they think she'll crack. Because as long as they think she'll crack, it's coercion, not punishment. It's the difference. They act as if there's a difference in those things. they're trying to say, well, you can coerce her, but you can't necessarily punish her. It's not punitive. But of course, that's nonsense. It is punitive. Manning's lawyer filed a motion later last month asking the court to reconsider the sanctions, calling them definitionally punitive rather than coercive. And I found that standard to be amazing because it's so subjective. There is no computer, there's no number, there's not math that comes together and say, okay, now you've reached a point where it's punitive. That standard doesn't exist. That standard is literally subjective and dependent upon the judge themselves. That's an astonishing standard. You can keep her in there for 10 years with a judge saying, we don't think that's punitive at all. We think that's perfectly okay. That is an astonishing standard. Astonishing standard. But nevertheless, it's true. They're upping the ante on this. They're going to charge her $500 a day until she testifies. And this is coming up this week. And right here, just so you can see for yourself. I talked about this when this first came up, because this was going to be a potential eventuality where they were trying to up the ante of the coercion. So it's like putting her in jail is not enough. You also have to torture her economically. Hashtag resistance. Explain to me about the resistance. You know, when people were, blowing stuff up in Iraq, where was these resistance fighters? Or better yet, when Obama was blowing and tearing down Libya. You can buy black slaves in Libya now. You know that, right? Thanks, Obama. Good job. When he was doing that. When Hillary Clinton was advising him on that. When Biden was advising him on that. When all of these guys thought it was perfectly okay to destroy a country. Where was this resistance? I just don't understand. When Obama said we tortured some folks. Where was this resistance? What about these murdering with these drones? I don't understand. These people act like the country fell off of a cliff. She is literally in prison. You talking about principles? You talking about resistance? Turn in your cards. That's resistance. What you're doing is playing around and being hysterical. There's a difference in those things. There's a massive difference in those things. $500 a day. And let's look at it. U.S. District Court Anthony Tringa, an appointee of Bush, ordered that if Chelsea Manning does not purge herself of contempt within 30 days of this order, she shall incur a conditional fine of $500 a day until such time as she purges herself of contempt. The fines will double next month to $1,000 per day under the judge's order. But that's not punitive at all. That's purely just coercive. It's not punitive. At which point does it become punitive? What day? What hour? Explain to me. Explain to all of us. So at the very least, we can know and say, okay, this is the point at which it's... No, there is no point. You can keep her in that prison in perpetuity. All of this is because they want Assange. They're squeezing her to try to get her to squeak for Assange. You heard her. She's not squeaking. She's not squeaking at all. And she also made another good point. She said, you already have Assange. You already have her. What do you need me for? All right, I'll leave this. This annoys me, man. If you remember, Chelsea Manning turned in a video to WikiLeaks showing that the United States was essentially, well, we didn't know who we were killing. The pilot of a helicopter essentially mowed down a Reuters reporter. They didn't know who they were slaughtering. And fact of the matter is, this is not an isolated incident. How can it be an isolated incident? How can it? But we're shocked, the shit that people are angry. We don't understand why they hate us. Why do they dislike us so? I don't get it. Do you know the reason that Chelsea Manning gave this tape? Because she was so naive that she thought that the United States was trying to do something good in Iraq and that we were spoiling our efforts and the people that we were murdering and killing and the chaos that we were causing in the country. She's not naive anymore, I tell you that much. I'll end this here. Who is this, Nene? Nene, Joe Biden is an Antifa hero. An Antifa hero, Jesus Christ. That comes out to $15,000 for the first month. And then $30,000 for the second month. And the question is, how many months does it take? And then there's a secondary question. If she doesn't pay that, then what? Say, for example, you keep her in prison for, let's say, 2 months. Let's say the world opens up. 2 months. $30,000, $15,000, $45,000. What if she doesn't pay that? Most people don't have $500 in the bank at all. And you're charging her $500 a day and then $1,000 on top of that. And considering she was in prison for all that time, it is hard to know whether or not she has resources at all. But this is not punitive at all. This is not punitive at all. It's just coercive. We're just trying to coerce her. What if she can't pay that? Do you put her in debtor's prison? Meaning, if she can't afford to pay the $15,000 that you put on her head to try to squeeze her in a punitive, coercive, punitive, to try to get her to talk, do you put her back in prison? This is sick. Absolutely sick. I'll end this here. I have more stories, so I'm not going to keep this long. How can you pay a fine when you're incarcerated? Yes. And you know the wild part about it? We do have debtor's prison in this country. Try to get a ticket. Try to get some kind of speeding ticket, some kind of speeding fine, and not pay it. There's some people that can't afford to pay speeding tickets. I'll tell you this. My mom made a little more than minimum wage. She got her job immediately after high school. And she didn't have this thing where she wanted to go to college. She didn't have this thing where she wanted to, she wasn't the Excel type. She was more the type that, look, I want to take care of my own. I have a kid. I want to take care of my kid. That's an aspiration of itself. And trying to raise something is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And but by the same token, she got a job immediately out of high school. And because she got a job immediately out of high school, over the time she was at the company, whereas under normal circumstances, a person got, let's say, a regular pay, just based on an incremental thing, the kind of pay goes up. Well, in her case, they were paying her as if they were paying a teenager, and they didn't necessarily bump her salary up. It was just kind of this modest thing. And so she's trying to raise a kid on that. And then trying to raise a kid on that, if she would have got a speeding ticket, she wouldn't have been able to pay that. We were barely able to pay just trying to get from point A to point B, like just food and stuff. And so she is not alone in that. And there are people who would get a speeding ticket under those terms and not pay it or can't pay it. In which case, these guys get, after a while, they started putting more fees on it. Like, it becomes this thing where they're underwater in a way that they can never pay it back, in which case the courts wants their money, in which case they put these people in prison for it. It's sick. It's sick. It really is. On his worst day, Bezos made $87,500 a minute. Think about that. Trump is a coward for not pardoning Chelsea Manning. I was going to name this video Trump's greatest betrayal. The problem is that this particular one wasn't directly related to Chelsea Manning. Is not. They're not trying to get Julian Assange in this case for the DNC leaks, even though they are. They're trying to get him for this, the information that he was released for this. But this is obscene. I mean, the United States, they're trying to say that the United States reached literally across the world. Like, understand the precedent is set. Julian Assange is not an American citizen. Julian Assange is releasing information, and Australia betrays him. Trump screams WikiLeaks and then pretends like he doesn't know what it is. I mean, this is somewhat obscene that the United States has the ability to literally reach across and grab somebody from some other country and drag them back to the United States to hold them accountable to our laws. He's not even a U.S. citizen. Fucking insane. How can you get an arrest? How can you get rearrested after a presidential pardon? Can you? I mean, I would imagine if they get you on a different charge. Maybe. They would have to get you on a different charge. H.A. Goodman is spinning Assange and Chelsea Trump is saying, oh, Zal, don't tell me that. I like HA. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. I like HA. I don't want him saying insane stuff. I don't like him saying insane stuff. Oh, I see what you mean. You're talking about she wasn't pardoned. He just let her out. I see what you mean. He didn't. She's not charged with anything. Like she's being rearrested, but she hasn't been charged. This is not about a charge. She has a subpoena, and she's refusing to testify for the subpoena, so they're putting her in prison. They're squeezing her, or jail. They're squeezing her until she talks. Yeah, she's not being she's not arrested, or she's not under arrest in a sense. Not in the traditional sense of her did something wrong and her putting her in prison for it or jail for it. Yeah, all right, I'll end this here because I have more that I want to do. No, it's not double jeopardy. It doesn't apply. Doesn't apply. Mean streets of Alabama, I know, right? All right, guys. If you enjoy, yeah, it's contempt of court. It's not a charge. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.